One senior American diplomat briefing anonymously said, if you look at the sum of the parts, the phone call with Putin, the Riyadh meeting, the Alaska summit, the mineral remarks, you see a coherent strategy. The US is pivoting from champion of Ukraine to mediator seller of Russia. In practical terms, this means that Ukraine may face mounting pressure to accept a ceasefire based on current front lines, to relinquish claims on Crimea and large swathes of the Donbass region, and to accept neutrality rather than join alliances such as NATO. Trump has openly called Ukraine's ambitions to join the alliance impossible, and he has assured that American troops will not be sent to fight in Ukraine. From Kyiv's perspective, those positions are unacceptable. President Zelenskyy has maintained that no deal is credible unless Ukraine is at the table as a full partner and retains the right to reclaim all its territory. His Foreign Office said on Friday, "We will not accept any deal that imposes surrender by decree." Yet US public diplomacy is changing. Trump's team is emphasizing urgency. "We cannot let this war drag on indefinitely," the president told reporters. "Millions of people have died. We must end the bloodshed." That urgency is intersecting with realpolitik. The US economy needs rare earth imports. Russia is open for business. Europe is war-weary. In Moscow, Putin welcomed the shift. He portrayed the US willingness to engage on minerals and territorial settlement as validation of Russia's demands. In a statement, the Kremlin said, Russia is ready to explore economic cooperation with the United States on mutually beneficial terms while securing peace in our historical neighborhood. But many Western analysts caution that the deal may favor Moscow far more than Washington or Kyiv. A ceasefire anchored on existing front lines would legitimize Russian gains, effectively rewarding the Kremlin's aggression. From Europe's viewpoint, the US pivot risks destabilizing the unity of the transatlantic alliance, undermining the principle that aggressors cannot impose their terms through force. Despite the new posture, Trump insisted his role was constructive. "I think we have a really good deal to end this war," he said at one press appearance. He underscored, "We're going to make sure Ukraine gets security guarantees, but you also have to recognize reality." In that same appearance, he said, "If you give back the land, we'll make sure you're safe." That formula, land in exchange for guarantees, is increasingly being embedded in US talking points. For Ukraine's allies, the question now is what to do. Some major European states are accelerating arms supplies to Kyiv, worried that Washington is pulling back. Others are exploring the possibility of a separate peace track with Russia without US leadership. Meanwhile, Trump's Republican-led Congress remains divided. Some members strongly support Ukraine and oppose any deal that leaves territory ceded. Others welcome a rapid exit from the war and urge economic engagement with Russia. In Washington's diplomatic corridors, conversations are underway about how to leverage Russian mineral wealth in the service of US strategic goals. Rare earths, critical for advanced manufacturing and defense, have become a central piece of the calculus. For decades, the US has sought to diversify supply chains away from China. Now Russia is being viewed as a partner in that mission. However, critics note the risk. By tying US interests to Russia's economic future, Washington may reduce its leverage in pressing Moscow to respect Ukraine's sovereignty. One think tank analyst observed, when your business interests overlap with someone's national security strategy, you tend to become less willing to challenge them. He said, "I'd like to buy minerals on Russian land too." President Donald Trump made that remark in public, and the comment underscores a dramatic shift in US foreign policy, one that may realign Washington's stance away from its long-standing support for Ukraine's defense and toward deeper economic engagement with Russia. In a White House address, Trump referenced a recent offer from President Vladimir Putin of the Russian Federation, signaling his willingness to accept access to Russian mineral resources. He asked rhetorically, "Why shouldn't we buy them when we can?" That line struck many observers as emblematic of a broader recalibration of US strategy in the face of the Russian-Ukrainian war. The timing could not be more sensitive. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who once enjoyed near universal backing in Washington, now finds himself with a US partner whose agenda appears to be shifting. As one senior European diplomat put it bluntly, "We are seeing a US leader align more closely with Moscow's endgame than with Kyiv's." In his remarks, Trump explicitly signaled a willingness to encourage Ukraine to make territorial concessions. He told Zelenskyy that Russia will destroy you if you don't agree now, according to officials familiar with the meeting. That exact phrasing, while confirmed by multiple briefers, is illustrative of the hard pivot. He also told reporters traveling with him aboard Air Force One that Ukraine should leave it the way it is now, go home, stop fighting, stop killing people. The message being freeze the war where it stands, endorse a ceasefire along the current front lines, and accept that full Ukrainian restoration of territory is not feasible. Why this reversal? Analysts say a combination of factors. Trump's campaign promised to end the war swiftly, fatigue over American involvement, rising costs of aid, and emerging US-Russia economic interests. The mineral deal is, in fact, widely seen as one piece of a larger diplomatic détente pending between Washington and Moscow. In February 2025, Trump phoned Putin for the first time since the war began. The conversation lasted around 90 minutes and covered Ukraine, energy supplies, artificial intelligence, and bilateral relations. A month later, the two countries held a ministerial meeting in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, to explore avenues for ending the conflict. Notably, Ukraine was not present. Many Kyiv allied capitals regarded that as a clear signal that the US was moving toward a Moscow-first agenda. In August, the Trump-Putin summit in Anchorage saw both presidents meet at a US military base, an unprecedented setting for such diplomacy. The summit concluded with no public agreement, but with Trump signaling that the onus was now on Ukraine to yield territory in exchange for peace, a position many European allies found alarming. For Ukraine, which has fought since 2022 to reclaim territory occupied by Russian forces, the shift by Washington raises profound strategic questions. President Zelenskyy now finds himself asking, if my most powerful ally is urging concession, what is left to fight for? In Brussels, capitals from Poland to Germany are debating whether to double down on Ukraine or hedge toward a deal with Russia. Some fear that Washington's apparent rapprochement with Moscow undermines NATO's deterrence posture and the principle that countries cannot be coerced into war and forced into concession. Trump's embrace of Russian mineral access is perhaps the clearest economic sign of the new policy. He repeatedly referred to very good rare earths in Russia and asked, why shouldn't we get our share? He told reporters that he expected Zelenskyy to visit Washington to sign a rare minerals deal with Russia, an arrangement that would tie US economic interests directly to Moscow's. In short, the narrative has flipped once the US urged Ukraine to hold firm to avoid any territorial deal under duress, to remain independent and export-focused. Now, the US president appears to accept, even advocate, a pathway in which Ukraine cedes land, Russia keeps it, and the US buys minerals. Back in Kyiv, President Zelenskyy has responded cautiously. He said publicly, we welcome peace, but not at the cost of our independence or our land. Rankings of public support in Ukraine show a majority would rather continue the war than accept a peace deal that admits defeat. Many Ukrainians interpret the US shift as abandonment. On the ground, Russian forces continue to hold large swathes of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, as well as parts of Zaporizhzhia and Kherson. A freeze along those lines would enshrine those gains as permanent. Moscow's war economy is under strain, and a deal could relieve sanctions pressure. For the Kremlin, the new US posture offers a diplomatic lifeline. At the same time, European capitals are racing to decide how to respond. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk warned that none of us should put pressure on Ukraine when it comes to territorial concessions. He added, one thing is absolutely clear. Europe's solidarity with Ukraine against Russia's aggression is today more important than ever before. In the United States, the domestic politics are swirling. The Trump administration is proposing legislation to give US companies access to Russian rare earth deposits under new tax and regulatory regimes. Senate committees are hearing testimony on how to rebuild US critical mineral supply chains. Supporters say this is long overdue independence from Chinese supply. Detractors say it hands a propaganda win to Russia. Amid those debates, one key question looms. If the US pivot holds, what happens to Ukraine? Will it have the full backing of America and NATO? Or will Washington settle for a peace deal without Kyiv's full input, leaving Ukraine with reduced sovereignty and security? The answer may well reshape Europe's security architecture for decades. In a sobering moment, Trump told reporters, the war is going to end, whether you like it or not. For many Ukrainians and Europeans, that closing remark has dual meaning. Yes, the war will end, but perhaps on terms they never anticipated. In Moscow, celebrated by the invitation and the economic overtures, Putin may claim victory, not on the battlefield, but at the negotiating table. In Kyiv, there is rising anxiety. The West's champion may be switching sides. And in Washington, what once was a mission of democracy and defense is being reframed as a business deal and geopolitical reset. Finally, one senior US official summarized it plainly. We are realigning our priorities. Ukraine remains important, but minerals, Russia, and stability have moved to the front of the line. To many observers, that sentence constitutes the clearest possible statement of change. The world will now watch closely how Ukraine, Europe, and the United States respond as the pivot gathers momentum.